you check the children? Show a little match sometimes.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes. That is what
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Bienvenidos, Fright fans, and welcome back to the Horror Show. I am Jaime and Fuego, and so very stoked to be back here at the Horror Show studios in the deadly desert of the Arizona. And I am giving you a review of a feature that just recently hit Shudder about a week ago as of this recording, but it actually got some pretty major esteem when it won Scariest Feature at the recent edition, I believe last year, of the Overlook Film Festival. But translated from its native language, it is entitled Best Wishes to All. Now, this is a J-horror film, so initially I was wondering if it was hailing from South Korea, but no, it is from Japan, actually. And so, I mean, Japanese horror, especially in the late 90s and early 2000s, was like the big thing, especially here in, North America, where, I mean, yes, you had the stuff, migrating over, the Japanese originals and stuff like that, but when you had, like, Gore Verbinski remaking The Ring, and then, Sarah Michelle Gellar in The Grudge, for instance, and ironically enough, the original Japanese director of The Grudge is a producer on this film. I just want to make sure that I get his name correct, so I believe it is, I'm just trying to... Takashi Shimizu. And so he's a producer on this particular film that is actually hailing from a first-time writer-director in Yuta Shimotsu. But, yeah, man, so this film, it explores it very much in the way that... a lot of Japanese films, when they explore this sort of spooky stuff, it's all about the suggestive and less about like the shock and awe gore that we get in so many different, like, I guess, American films, and then certain other things that come from Europe or, like South America and Mexico or whatever. But there is a interesting element of like dread and restraint and building tension that you have in a lot of J-horror, and this film is no exception. I'm not gonna go out and say that I absolutely loved it, but I found it intriguing, most notably because of the themes that are explored within this, those of like depopulation, and also the fact that there is a underlining just kind of, I guess, rumination throughout about, are you happy? And how, what if the only way somebody can actually be happy is, from the suffering of others, so to speak. It's a theme that runs through this entire film, and that sort of just thematic exploration I found very interesting. Some of the rest of it was a little predictable, and, performances were good. We always give, just all-out, impressions and overall thoughts and stuff like that when we begin these reviews, obviously. If you've seen any of them before on the channel, Cecil, Robert, Davey, myself, and so, yeah, I enjoyed it. I'm not going to say that it is, like, upper echelon of, Japanese horror classics or anything of that nature, but it's not Ringu or up to that level or anything. But, I did enjoy it much more so from those explorations of the dramatic elements than the actual, horror involved. It's much more, like, on the, like, demented and deranged side of, like, psychology as opposed to, anything that's really gonna, like, gross you out. It's more so from just those different topics explored gonna sit with you in that particular regard. And so, getting into story, you have this young girl who we see as like an adolescent at the very beginning of the movie, as a younger child, and she's visiting with her parents and her grandparents, and yet you can tell that she feels very out of place amongst all of them, and her grandparents ask her, like, I believe at least a couple of times, are you happy? And you can tell that she's not. There is just something off, whether it's her or whether she just feels uncomfortable around these people that are her family and whatever. And she is also, as I kind of make the correlation, just suspicious of some weird, like, bumps in the night that she is hearing when she is making this visit and stuff. And so obviously immediately the viewer is wondering, and this is a non-spoiler review, so I'm not going to divulge, but the viewer is wondering, like, okay, is it a ghost? Is it, something else? I mean, lots of otherworldly presences are explored in a lot of J-horror, and so it gets the gears turning, and as a child, you don't get that explanation as to what is going on, because she wakes up from a dream, and this is within the first few minutes of the movie, so this isn't really, like, giving a lot away, because the entirety of the rest of the movie is exploring her as an adult, going back and visiting these two grandparents, and she is awaiting her father, and then like the rest of the family and stuff to actually come and join up. But when she's there initially, she's there with just the grandparents, and she can tell that even though she hasn't seen them in years, she's studying medicine in Tokyo, and the grandparents are in a more rural area outside of the metropolis and everything. But she can tell, even though it's like, it's sweet off the bat. She even says when she's talking on the phone, I believe with the rest of her family that's on their way down, and she's like, hurry up, they're making small talk, but they're still acting kind of weird with me, and so on. There's a little bit of a subplot where she reconnects with a boy that I guess there was some sort of like crush thing going down. It's not shown at all when you have that opening sequence with her as a child, hearing the bump in the attic area of her grandparents' home. But, there is that subplot of the like little bit of romance, but there's also just, you start to really get the feeling that it's not just stuff that is off with the grandparents. It's a little more widespread in this particular area, but perhaps there are people who are not like buying into this sort of very strange mentality. I don't know. It's really, I have to start walking on eggshells because there is a revelation about something that permeates the mindsets of a lot of people who are there. You do eventually figure out what the what the nature of the said bumps in the house is, because when she's staying with the grandparents, she immediately hears it again. Well, not immediately, but relatively quickly within the constraints of the film, she is reintroduced to that and remembers obviously the dread and just the suspicions and stuff that she had as a kid, and yet there is still the inquiries about, are you happy? Are you happy? And that's where it ties back in with how impressive I thought those aspects of the writing were. And it gets pretty philosophical, especially where later in the film, when our lead girl is really starting to pull the curtain back and figure out the full extent of what is happening, with and what is it seems to be like a long adopted mentality amongst most of this rural area. She goes to find somebody specifically that can impart some insight as to why this is so prevalent, and this person has achieved a level of cynicism and is talking about how, hey, it's very much about how the suffering of some are what actually allow the happiness, the joy of others. I mean, there's a scene with the grandparents earlier when she first arrives and is eating a meal with them, and they're like, how's the pork? And then they start oinking like pigs, the grandma and grandpa. There's some very darkly comedic, strange stuff within this movie, and I can expand on that a little bit when I mention performances and everything. But a sentiment that is given up by the grandparents is that, hey, the pigs are, raised in these tiny little cages and, fed and then slaughtered, and, the pigs are happy to be killed, and, they're grateful to be our meal. And then the younger girl, the granddaughter, is like, no, we should be grateful for them, and so that whole aspect of the joy of some is based on the suffering of others. As I said, it is the theme that really makes this film resonate with me as much as it did, because if not for that exploration, everything else is a little more on the predictable side, especially with what happens in the third act with certain character motivations and decisions that are made. Anybody who has seen the movie definitely knows what I'm referring to here. But as a whole, I found, just to double and triple down on it one more time, I found those societal ruminations to be extremely poignant. Performances are quite good, when it gets very strange with the grandparents, because I was definitely getting some vibes of more creepy grandparents. I mean, a lot of people have probably seen Shamalama Ding Dong's The Visit. Creepy grandparents, it's not the first time we've seen this. It's happened. It's almost becoming kind of a trope at this particular point, but they're efficient in the fact that they're not just creepy. There's also like the darkly comedic aspect of just some of their strange quirks and nuances and things of that nature. The lead girl is good as well. She has a lot to shoulder, especially in the third act when she's really conflicted about certain things that she's learning, and it's very much, how do I say it without divulging too much? It is very much like a loyalty versus conviction sort of thing, and those two things like wrenching her back and forth, and but there is an interesting moral barometer that comes along with that that crush from childhood that she hooks back up with, and some of the things that tie in with decisions that his family has made. And he's good too. You know, he's a little more of like the tortured artist type, standoffish, but still, you know, he's still attracted to her and everything. But yeah, and you get the rest of her, you know, her parents and whatever, a younger sibling that show up. So that stuff is, you know, decently performed as well. It's well shot. The cinematography of this area of Japan, it's gorgeous. I like the way that there is a claustrophobic aspect to the interiors of this particular Japanese home, and I've seen it in a number of other J-horror films, and not just J-horror, K-horror too. In just the way that their architecture is laid out, it's these very like narrow, shorter kind of corridors that make up most of these homes and stuff, and so it does in you know, some of the tenser moments just up the dread factor, which I appreciated. And I mean, if I'm going to get into the gore and, you know, some of the bloody stuff, you do get a little bit of it, and some disturbing imagery. There's one bit that I would like to mention, but I think it would be a little too spoilery as far as the nature of what's going on in this town amongst these people and everything, and so I guess I can't mention that. But you do see blood from orifices and stuff, and just weird behavior, like kind of poking and almost like gouging of eyes at times. And so there are a few gnarly bits. Most of them are saved for like the back half of the movie, when you start to get more of a realization as to what's transpiring. So, you know, this will definitely be not for everybody, especially those who don't like I mean, I have no issues with subtitled foreign films. I know there are some who do, so there's like no dubbed version that you would find on something like Netflix. This is on Shudder as of the 13th of this month, about a little over a week ago. So, you know, you will have to read some subtitles, unfortunately, and it is very much the cliched slow burn that you see in a lot of stuff that comes from, you know, this area of the world, when it's that just building tension and much more, as I said at the beginning of the review, to bookend this all, it's much more about suggestion initially until you finally start to get to the realization, and then it's okay, when this has been presented most notably to our lead character, what is she going to do with it? And so yeah, I mean, as a whole, best wishes to all. If you're a Shudder subscriber, or if you also have AMC Plus, Shudder is folded in and included with AMC Plus. If you're somebody who has that for, like, I don't know, the newer Walking Dead series and Dead City with Negan and Maggie, or if you have it for like the Interview with the Vampire and Mayfair Witches, there's a lot of good stuff on AMC Plus actually. So you have Shudder. Just for all of you who may be coming across this video, you have everything in the Shudder catalog if you have AMC Plus. I think the only bit you don't have is the live TV function that comes with Shudder if you have it separately. But yeah, that's my thoughts, guys, here on the Horror Show channel for best wishes to all. That is now on Shudder after a run on the festival circuit. I extend a grande gracias. I've been Jaime and Fuego. You can find more on all social media sectors: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, doing stuff that is of the non-spectacular variety. But more importantly, have you seen this film on Shudder? Did you catch it when it was on the festival circuit, perhaps? Did you think it was satisfying, or was it a little too tropey for you, a little too predictable? I would be very curious to see your thoughts in the comments below. You know, the liking, the sharing, and if you're just stumbling upon this review, subscribing. It is all greatly appreciated. So, arigato, everybody. Thank you so very much. Gracias for tuning in. And until next time, Fright fans, remember, stay scared.